Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Rocky Top Insider Press Pass podcast. I'm your host, Jack Foster, as always, joined alongside Rick Butler and Ryan Schumpert on this Wednesday, November 13th edition, fresh off the second round of college football rankings release from last night. Shorter show this time around, but still a lot to take away from Tennessee's ranking, which stayed the same, and that might not be a good thing for Tennessee. But, Ryan, how you doing this morning?
Doing well. Excited to get into all of it, and then obviously a real big game on Saturday for us to preview as well.
Absolutely. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing good. It's good to be back on the show with you guys here on a Wednesday morning. Real quick, Jack, I just want to say a big thank you. I know we're about to get into a lot of playoff talk. We were all up late last night watching and taking in all the playoff stuff that was going on. But just want to say a big thank you to Christenberry Elementary School for having Jack and I out to the career fair on Tuesday evening. We had a blast talking with the kiddos there. We had a blast interacting with the parents and the families. It's always great to give back to the community. And again, Christenberry Elementary School was kind enough to invite Rocky Top Insider out there to talk to the kiddos. So Jack and I got to do that for a couple hours last night. Ryan was holding the fort down at basketball practice with Rick Barnes and the guys. So we've been busy. RTI has certainly not lost a step during crossover season, but just want to say a big thank you to them. That was a ton of fun. And with that being said, I guess we can start our debates and start our playoff talk, but we had a good time last night.
I was disappointed I couldn't find the office scene where they go to the job fair and Michael's up. I was trying to find that video on YouTube when he's up on the stage. He's like, H&R Block? Garbage. Refreshments? Bush League.
Yeah.
That's the vibe
so
I was
funny.
hoping Rick went and took it to Mike up on stage and started ripping everybody else.
I was thinking about that episode yesterday, and it's like we should just, bring one thing and put it on the table, like he did with a piece of paper just put it on the table. I don't know what that would have been. I guess, honestly, if you could pick one thing that would encompass our entire job, I guess it'd just be a laptop, right? Like that would be the one.
I would have loved if it was Jack brought his because we had a ton of just knickknacks and props and things like that. But Jack brought his foul ball from, I believe it was Hoover. And that's my one prop that I would have just loved. As sports writers, we just had one baseball on our table, just right in the middle. And we even had a young kid maybe try to, kind of run off with not run off by any means, but he was really infatuated with that baseball. I thought he was going to run off with it. So luckily that didn't happen. Jack got to keep it, but that would have been my one prop, is just a baseball, just because that is completely random.
I was actually surprised more kids didn't try to steal it. I was impressed. I was like, wow, this is this bunch is put together. And only one kid tried to run off with the baseball. That's a win. I've set the over-under at like 3.5.
We had like 6 or 7 of the press badges out there too. And some of the kids were wanting to kind of try them on. And I thought one of those was going to get stolen for sure. But luckily it didn't happen.
Yeah.
They were great kids though. I don't say that like the kids were thieves.
The kids were great.
But
kids were great.
Rick's ripping the kids.
No, Rick's not ripping the kids. We had a great time again. Thank you to Christenberry Elementary School.
Absolutely. All right, let's dive into the rankings release. It was a newsy night for Tennessee, given the fact that 2 teams jumped the Vols, which could mean bad news later on. BYU and Indiana each jumped Tennessee. Indiana moving up to 5, BYU to 6, both of which were behind Tennessee a week ago. We talked last week about how it was important for Tennessee to be ahead of Indiana, given the fact that both remaining schedules for each team were about the same. One tough game and the rest will be favored in and should win. So now it seems an 11-1 Indiana will be in a better position than a 10-2 Tennessee if Indiana loses to Ohio State and Tennessee loses to Georgia, Ryan, whereas it wasn't the case last week. And given the fact of how many teams could finish 10-2 in the SEC, and with Penn State and Notre Dame pretty much having buys rest of the season. I know Notre Dame plays undefeated Army, but still it could be tricky for Tennessee to get back over Indiana if they both finish, as I said, 10-2 Tennessee, 11-1 Indiana.
For sure. I mean, that's definitely the significance of it. I mean, on that note, though, it's just like what I've said here a million times. There's just no rhyme or reason or actual justification for how these rankings work. There's none of it. So I don't know. Like, yeah, one would think that this bodes really poorly for Tennessee, but I'm not sure we can rule out the committee just randomly changing their mind and throwing some garbage explanation out there again for why Tennessee would jump Indiana going forward. So I guess that's the positive of it, because the explanations for why BYU and Indiana jumped Tennessee last night, which was really twofold. It was one, both BYU and Indiana had big wins over the weekend. They did not. Indiana won by 5 at home against a bad Michigan team.
Yeah.
And BYU went on the road and won by 1, came from behind to beat a bad Utah team. So those were not big wins. The other thing they mentioned is Tennessee's offense has been really inconsistent the back half of the season. And that is accurate. But last week they're coming off their highest scored game in SEC play, and they did it, scored 20 points with their starting quarterback in the first half and, basically moved the ball with ease. So the explanation made no sense, which isn't shocking given, again, there's no rhyme or reason. The committee just does whatever they want, and then they throw whatever, bull crap up against the wall each week to try to defend it.
Well,
Yeah,
and maybe,
Yeah,
I'll just kind of go right off of that. Is maybe, oh man, I'm now losing my train of thought.
maybe I can spark it.
Dang.
I was going to say,
Okay, go ahead.
kind of going off what Ryan said, there's no reason, if what they said this time around for BYU and Indiana being ahead of Tennessee, there's no reason that Tennessee should have been ahead of BYU and Indiana last week. It's almost as if the committee realized that maybe they messed up last week, and we're like, okay, we'll just correct ourselves. And then, like Ryan said, throw some bullcrap reason as to why. There's no reason why, I don't think, because you can't confidently say or accurately say that those wins are big for Indiana and BYU this past week. It's just not the case, and Tennessee did nothing to drop. So I just think the committee was like, these two undefeated teams should probably be ahead of Tennessee. We messed up last week.
Yeah.
Let's put them ahead. And you can make the argument as to whether it's just right or wrong in general, but it does make sense theoretically for two undefeated teams to be ahead of Tennessee. So I think if it was this way last week, nobody would have had a problem with it. Been like, okay, Tennessee's behind two undefeated teams. Fine. But the fact that they changed it and there's no reason for there to be change causes the, confusion here.
Yeah, you guys are right, because there was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of outrage online last night from the Tennessee component of the fan base. Here's what Playoff Chair Ward Manuel said, because you guys have alluded to it so far, but I just want to tell the audience what their exact quote was. So it was this quote: "It really came down to the play last week of both Indiana and BYU, both winning big games on their schedule. BYU obviously undefeated, two wins at top 25 opponents at SMU and against Kansas State. In looking at it, as we assessed all the teams, we just felt that Indiana and BYU earned the 5 and the 6 slot, and Tennessee stayed where they are." You guys are right. BYU beat Utah last weekend, 22-21. Indiana beat Michigan. In what world is Michigan a big win? I mean, I'm trying to look at the schedule right here. They are 5-5 on the season, so they were 5-4 going into that game. In what world is a 500 Big Ten team a big game? And to Ryan's point, it's not like Tennessee played a big game themselves. They played Mississippi State, the SEC last place team, but they addressed some of the things that the committee wanted to see. They wanted to see more offense. That leads me to the point that I was about to talk about a second ago. And I don't know, you guys can kind of correct me if you think I'm exaggerating my thinking a little bit. And maybe it's not being talked about publicly. Maybe it is being talked about behind closed doors, but there's a lot of conversation about Tennessee's offense not really being that in tune. This is what they had to say, quote, "Tennessee, the offense has struggled some of the second half of the season, not being consistent early in the year. We just felt as a committee that it was time. Indiana has been playing very well, a close one at Michigan. Other than that, they've dominated everyone they played." Nobody talks about Tennessee's defense as like hey, here's something that this team does, rest their, does weigh heavy on their shoulders, that this is a dominant defense, that we are going to give them credit for that. And again, maybe I'm just kind of thinking of it as, you take this away, but what about giving this? So you guys can kind of correct me if you think I'm a little bit wrong there, but I don't know. That's kind of my thoughts. My two thoughts as we sit here this morning is, in what world is Michigan a big win enough to jump over Tennessee in this situation when Tennessee won their average game as well? And then also, I think that there should be more credit to Tennessee's defense. It's been the backbone of this team so far. I understand that people are going to point out the offense. And yes, I'm not trying to make any excuses for the offense, but it's been a nasty defense that I think kind of gives them a little bit of credit here in these conversations as well.
Well, it's almost like I don't even truly believe this because I think they were just saying whatever the guy at Ward Manuel was just saying whatever he could to justify it. But it's almost like it was going in with the preseason notions of Michigan and
Brand
Oklahoma
bias.
State being big wins because both those teams were supposed to be good. Both those teams Utah, not Oklahoma State. Both those teams were supposed to be two of the harder games on the schedule for Indiana and BYU. Certainly Tennessee would, if you're going to play it that way, Tennessee would like that because the Oklahoma win and the NC State win would look a lot better. But yeah, no, that just doesn't really, it doesn't add up. And I think the thing that, Jack, I think you're right. It's almost like they just felt like they made a mistake the first week. But again, that's just where nothing happens 2 weeks ago. Like the committee's had 8 weeks to, watch it, figure it out, to talk about it. Nothing happened the week before, the week Tennessee played Kentucky. Nothing happened for BYU or Indiana that was particularly surprising. None of them played close games that week that they could have overreacted to and we got to really not, knock them now. There just doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason or consistency for how the committee chooses teams. And that's what has been my frustration with it for a while, and it continues. I think you're just almost outside of injuries. Injuries is the one thing that I do think you can't get from a computer, but other than that, I just feel like the freaking computer would do a much better job because at least there would be some criteria and you would know why teams are being chosen.
I think it's brand bias. And you see it across the rankings, like Clemson being ranked. No reason they should be ranked at all, but they are. Brand bias. Texas being third, little bit of brand bias. Penn State, same thing. Michigan's win, or a Michigan win being a reason for a ranking bump, brand bias. That is baked into a lot of this. I think it's yes, Michigan is 5-5, but Indiana's never been favored over Michigan, right? Ever, and they only have 10 wins in the history of the it's not even a rivalry, but the history of the matchup. So it's Indiana beat Michigan. Michigan's a big school, prop them up a little bit. And yes, when you look at the preseason, it's wow, okay, Indiana plays Ohio State, Michigan, that's 2 auto losses, and then we'll see what they can do otherwise. And then Utah, I think the photo finish may help BYU a little bit. Just the fact BYU is able to come back and pull off basically essentially a miraculous comeback with a little bit of help from the refs. Just the photo finish for BYU and the baked in brand bias of Indiana beating Michigan, I think, is probably helping them out.
And I will say, Indiana beating Michigan is a big win in the sense of why I think college football rocks. Indiana beating Michigan, period.
Yeah.
That statement.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
The
that's
reigning
awesome
national
Indiana
champions.
Fans. Indiana should be super fired up about that. They don't beat Michigan much. That's one of the big brands. It's if you're talking, no matter what happens to Indiana at the end of the season, it's been an awesome year for them. And I'd imagine all their fans look back in 5 years and say, yeah, we beat Michigan. That was awesome. So I don't want to discredit what that means from the college football standpoint and the coolness of small schools that are traditionally, or maybe not small schools, but schools that are traditionally not good, beating the big brands. That's awesome. But it shouldn't affect the playoff rankings because this Michigan team's not good. Indiana was supposed to win that game. If anything, they were supposed to win the game more convincingly than they did.
They didn't cover by 9 points.
Yeah. Jack, to your point a second ago, you mentioned Texas, and I'm not going to make the argument here that Texas shouldn't be the number 3 team. Frankly, I think they are. But to me, Texas is also kind of just that example of, there's not a lot of consistency to what's going on. And that's the main point that you guys have been making this whole time. Just there's not a lot of rhyme or reason. I think that nobody's really going to argue Oregon and Ohio State maybe as those top 2 teams. I don't know. I guess Ohio State did lose to Oregon. But then you have Texas right there. And Texas doesn't have any top 25 teams. But I think to pretty much everybody in the country, they've passed the eye test. Mm-hmm. So to me, is Texas, I guess they're saying that Texas's eye test is better than Penn State, Indiana, and BYU. I'm putting Penn State in this category too. Sure. It's better than Indiana and BYU, but to get Indiana and BYU over Texas or over Tennessee, then you have to go to the wins and losses that matter. So to your guys' point, you can look right here in just the top 7, and you can see that, okay, well, this looks like it was probably made because of the eye test or because of recent history. This decision looks like it was probably made because of wins. This decision looks like it was probably made because of losses. So there's just there's not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. And again, I think you guys have really hit that point hard. What do you guys think? Do Tennessee fans have a justified reason to be upset about this? Obviously, this isn't the final rankings by any stretch, but there was a lot of frustration online yesterday.
I'll say it's more unfortunate than anything that Tennessee gets leaped by Indiana now for no reason, but Tennessee probably should have been behind Indiana anyway, in my opinion. I know Tennessee has a better resume, and we could reassess after each team loses another game or something, after Indiana finally loses a game. But right now, like, Indiana's undefeated, so I don't think Tennessee fans really should be all that mad about Indiana being ahead of them in general. Just the fact that they weren't last week and now they are. It's weird. I still think Tennessee fans have all the justification in the world to be a little bit angry about being behind Texas and Penn State, honestly, because all three have one loss and Tennessee has a far better resume. And Texas has been better with the eye test, I guess, than Penn State. Like, you look at Penn State almost losing to USC and struggling a little bit with Wisconsin, like Bowling Green. They've had some bad games that they've won. Texas, it's not really the case. They've kind of steamrolled most of the teams they've beaten and then just have the one blowout loss to Georgia. So maybe that one has a little bit more of an argument, but I think there's more justification of being mad that Tennessee's still behind Penn State and Texas than there is they behind Indiana. It's just the fact that Indiana leaped them for no reason, which is weird.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And again, it's this strange situation of just saying, why were BYU and Indiana, why did they jump Tennessee, but not Penn State or not Texas? Yeah. And again, that's when I think the committee would say eye test. They I believe they might have yesterday, but I don't know. That leaves us more room to debate.
I'll say I think Tennessee was just the most unlucky team last night. Like, they did nothing to cause what happened, and it's just like, it's bad luck, I guess, just because the committee was like, okay, we'll just put Indiana and BYU ahead. It's more bad luck than anything, to be honest. So, Brian, you have any final thoughts?
I mean, I'll say, like, I don't think in the end BYU is really going to matter that much that they're ranked above Tennessee, because I still think a 2-loss Tennessee team, or whatever 2-loss group of SEC teams would be in over BYU if they were to lose a game. Like, I just think the Big 12 is getting one team in. I don't think they're going to get a second team in. Look, like, I mean, I can see the argument for Indiana being ahead of Tennessee, like you said, Jack. Like, I get that. If they were to lose to Ohio State, and especially if that's not just a barn burner game, I don't think they should get in over really any of these two-loss SEC teams. I mean, it's just they don't have any. I mean, they're only wins that are decent or home wins against teams that are 500. So
yeah, I get it.
It's not even like they went on the road to do this. And I'll say it again. I think I said it before we recorded. Texas, I can give some benefit of the doubt. They scheduled a non-conference game at Michigan. That was supposed to be a hard game. Indiana canceled a non-conference game against Louisville before the season. So they could have, if they had played the game they were supposed to play, they could have a good
Cardinals
win.
At
and
19.
they backed out of it. So sorry that you were cowards and wouldn't play freaking Louisville. Sorry your resume sucks now. Well, it could be decent if you would have played the game you were supposed to, but you backed out of playing Louisville. So it'll be interesting. Look, next week's the one. If Tennessee loses on Saturday, next week's the rankings. It's going to be really, really important to see where Tennessee falls and kind of the stack up of SEC teams with 2 losses, which will be a very interesting discussion on its own. Probably one we should save for next week. But
it's like, do they
I don't know,
fall
I feel
Alabama?
like from a resume standpoint, Tennessee's kind of right in the middle of the SEC teams that have 2 losses.
Yeah, I think that was going to be something else that I wanted to mention, and we might, Ryan, like you said, we might just be able to save that till next week. But so we talked a lot about what's in front of Tennessee. Behind Tennessee, though, you have Notre Dame, you have Miami, both with 1 loss. And then you have the trio of SEC schools that are just chomping at the bit to get up and into the playoffs, or at least improve their seeding. You have Alabama at 10, Ole Miss at 11, and Georgia at 12. Look, if you've been on social media anytime in the last 48 hours, Jack, I think you guys at the Always College Football podcast have been really hammering this home. But there's so many chaos situations for the SEC championship game. And I don't know how that's going to affect things. There's a lot of hypotheticals that are going around of, what about a 3-loss SEC title game loser? Are they are they, almost inclined to get a spot just because they were there at the 2-loss team, but they lost again for that third. So there are so many crazy things that could still happen. But I do look at that trio of SEC teams just chomping on Tennessee's heels: Alabama, Ole Miss, and Georgia. And I worry about any of the three of them passing Tennessee, because I like what their wins have been, especially if Georgia gets one over Tennessee this weekend. That's going to be big for them too, having wins against Texas and Tennessee. So Tennessee really needs this one against Georgia to just kind of keep that conversation in the rearview mirror. But it's going to be a big ask. So a lot is going to happen after this week, like you guys were saying a second ago.
Here's
I'm
one
not
more.
Go ahead, Ryan.
One more. I'm going to go ahead and get out in front of the hypocrisy that's going to be coming from the College Football Playoff Committee. Georgia is ranked behind Ole Miss this week, which is a statement of head-to-head really matters, because Georgia's resume is
and Alabama
significantly better than Ole Miss's on paper. Like unquestioned, their losses are significantly better than Ole Miss's losses, and Texas is ranked 9 spots ahead of Georgia. So Georgia's win over Texas on the road is a lot better than Ole Miss's win over Texas or over Georgia at home. Go ahead and get on. That's what the committee is saying right now. You can see where this is going. If Tennessee loses this week, Alabama is going to be ahead of Tennessee because their resume, which it is, it is better than Tennessee's, is going to weigh more to them than the head-to-head game. Even though it's the exact same situation. Alabama's resume will be better than Tennessee's. Tennessee will have won the head-to-head. Georgia's resume is significantly better than Ole Miss's. Even right now, even before a potential win over Tennessee, it is significantly better than Ole Miss's. And Ole Miss, because of head-to-head, is ranked ahead of them.
So you're saying it's going to be a flip in ideology or in reasoning?
Yes.
And he's completely right. I was going to say that if I'm a Tennessee fan, I am very uneasy because Georgia's the first team out right now at 12. Tennessee's probably going to be in that exact spot. It's going to Tennessee at 8-2. If Tennessee loses to Georgia, is going to drop below Notre Dame and Miami for sure, and is probably going to drop behind all three of those SEC teams: Bama, Ole Miss, and Georgia.
Agreed.
Because, like you said, there's so many conflicting ideologies with the committee, but I feel like they're going to be, well, Georgia beat Tennessee, can't have Tennessee above Georgia after the game. But, and then Alabama's just in such a sweet spot right now ahead of Ole Miss and Georgia that they're kind of like have this buffer. So it's like, why would you drop Alabama for no reason? No reason being they did nothing to drop this weekend as long as they take care of business. So, yeah, it's not a great spot for Tennessee, if I'm being honest. I would feel a little uneasy right now.
Yeah, they need to get a bump after beating Vanderbilt. Is essentially like a significant bump, because that would be their second best win. Yeah. Obviously upsets, but yeah.
I wonder if you root for Texas A&M. I don't know if they drop Texas that far. But
they're not going to, even though Texas would undoubtedly have a worse resume than Tennessee. The way they're talking about Texas right now, they're just not going to drop them that far. Texas is going to make the playoffs with 2 losses. They've already declared that by saying that they're the number 3 team in the country with 0 good wins.
Yeah, and A&M probably leaps Tennessee in that scenario anyway, so yeah.
And again, I just wonder how the SEC title game is going to factor into all of this. I think that's huge, because let's say, I don't think it could happen. So maybe it's not even worth talking about. But LSU was a team that I saw plenty of hypotheticals about yesterday. And that is because LSU has a slim chance. But the fact that chance exists is why they're being talked about in one of these total chaos nuclear situations. So I am, that's the other thing about this. We're going to sit. I guess we could sit here, and we are going to sit here and break down this top 12, what's going to happen with wins and losses. But I still think that those conference games at the end of the year are just it's like throwing a rock into a still lake, right? Ripple effects everywhere. So, and these conversations aren't going to slow down anytime soon. But Ryan made a good point that next week's is going to be a big one for Tennessee fans. Regardless.
I'll say it. After we've talked for 25 minutes here, and I've been thinking about it all morning, I think Tennessee, assuming the Vols lose this weekend, let's say everybody has 2 losses except Texas, right? In the SEC, I think they're in the worst spot of all the 2-loss teams. Because
they may be, from what rankings are right now, they shouldn't be.
They shouldn't be, but I think they are in the worst spot because, like I said, they fall behind that trio, and A&M, I think, are in with a win. And A&M beats Texas, they're in Atlanta. So it's A&M's in. That's all you got to do,
Yeah.
So
And
I'd
they
rather
have
be A&M
Texas
than
at home.
Tennessee if Vols lose this weekend.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's It's
Man,
Yeah,
so
the
I
one
feel
that I
like.
think is. Go ahead,
Go
Rick.
ahead, Ryan. No. I'm making a joke, so you go ahead.
I say the one that, and I mean, look, I'm sure if Tennessee loses this week, we'll dive deeper into all the 2-loss SEC teams' resumes. But just the one that's going to be maddening is Ole Miss. Like, Ole Miss is going to have a worse resume than Tennessee, and the way they're setting this up, like we just talked about, Tennessee, at least for the time being, is going to fall below Ole Miss. Maybe a win over Vanderbilt and a close game in the Egg Bowl or something will make the resume flip. They'll change their logic on something and say put Tennessee above Ole Miss. But that's the one that, like, I know everybody wanted, and it would be thought it'd be better for Tennessee last week for Georgia to beat Ole Miss, and I completely agree with that. It would have been just to eliminate Ole Miss, but I still don't really see any sort of logical case for why Ole Miss would get in over Tennessee based on resume.
The committee clearly doesn't like Tennessee's loss to Arkansas. That was something that was mentioned last week. That's something that was, quote, discussed a lot. This is probably too late, but just asking you guys, do you think there's anything that Arkansas can do to improve their status to where that's maybe not
beat Texas?
I guess frowned. Yeah, they could beat Texas. And they also have Missouri in the final game of the year, but I don't think beating number 24 Missouri is going to give anybody enough reason to be like, you know what, maybe that loss isn't as bad as we thought it was. But I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think it would help just to go set. I mean, look, there's so many like mid teams. It would be a game we saw it last week. The committee pointed to Tennessee's win over Oklahoma and NC State being wins over teams with winning records. So, like, it would give them a line.
Also, why is it Arkansas's at 5-4? I mean, that's a team that if Michigan is a big win at 5-5, then is Arkansas not like a comparable loss? Like, I don't know. That's one of the.
Who
that
wins
might
neutral
not be
site,
a good
Arkansas
point.
or
That's
Michigan, just for fun?
What did you say?
Who wins neutral
Arkansas.
site? Hogs or Wolverines
Arkansas.
neutral site?
Probably
so,
Arkansas. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's probably like whose line is it
Taylon
anyway?
Green
Probably
healthy?
Arkansas minus like 3 would be my guess. 3.5, something like that.
They can. Michigan just can't score. So
Yeah, I think Taylon Green, if he was healthy, could get him in.
Man,
I feel like I need to go. I feel like I need to go for a walk.
Yeah, no,
I feel like I've got so much that we've just kind of unpacked
and there's so many
and
different
brought out of the box.
Yeah, and you mentioned LSU. It's like to think that they're not out of it. All they need is like 4 games to go their way, and then they're in Atlanta because of the 4th tiebreaker being strength of schedule. Like, there's a reality where the SEC title game is 10-2 Bama versus 9-3 LSU because 8 SEC teams have 2 league losses in the league. Crazy, literally a possibility.
That is insane.
So, and man, it's gonna be chaos, and I think if Tennessee could get really screwed later in the season, I'd keep it on your radar.
This is utter chaos. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a blitz. All right, let's get into the Georgia game though. All this is solved. Everything we talked about is solved if Tennessee wins this weekend.
Yeah.
Tennessee is going to Athens to take on the 12th ranked Bulldogs. Tennessee, of course, 7th. We learned that last night. Big question here, Ryan. Is Nico Iamaleava going to play? And talk about the rankings being crazy. Well, the Nico news was crazy last night with Chris the Bear Felica going on a podcast saying his sources are telling him Nico Iamaleava is not going to play, and it was a, quote, bad concussion. Then you got other people coming in. Thamel, given a very digestible report that, hey, there's nothing's confirmed at all. Nico is questionable, and he's been, with the team. He brought out the great shape quote from Josh Heupel, which he said Monday, I believe. So there's a lot going on here, obviously, but nothing's confirmed right now, Ryan, that Nico Iamaleava is or is not going to play. We still don't know.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't think if he's in concussion protocol, which is what Pete Thamel reported, and Pete Thamel's essentially the Adam Schefter of college football. So if there's anybody you're going to trust on this, it's him. Tennessee doesn't know. It's not even like Tennessee's just trying to keep it quiet and we don't know what they're going to do. I don't think they know. It's going to depend on his health status. So up in the air for sure. Obviously, that's just a major factor. We probably don't have time to, but we could probably talk for 15 minutes about what a Tennessee loss with Gaston Moore playing would mean for their playoff chances.
People might
So what if
the
Nico comes? Are they cooked?
People would say, "I don't want to listen."
Yeah, I mean, like, if Nico comes back and plays against the last two games, UTEP and Vanderbilt, like, it might end up maybe not being a good thing, but maybe it doesn't hurt him a ton. So, yeah, I mean, that's obviously every conversation about this game starts with that, because it's going to be a really, really tough task for Tennessee on Saturday, and certainly an even harder one if Nico Iamaleava can't go.
Yeah, Rick, I think Tennessee needs Nico. You saw last week of how, Georgia is gettable in the passing game, and this defense has been really great at times this season and has looked lackadaisical at points too. You look at the Texas game, a great performance, but last week not great. Inconsistent has been kind of the motto for Georgia's season, and you play a tough schedule like that, it's going to happen. But all across the board, Georgia's been pretty inconsistent, and the big mismatch here that bodes well for Tennessee in this game, Rick, is just how bad Carson Beck has been under pressure. 0 QBR in the last month facing pressure, and he's just been downright awful in the last 3 games, and James Pierce is coming to town. So I think you look at this Tennessee defensive line against a struggling Georgia O-line, specifically on the edge, and Tennessee's defensive line could be in for a big day.
Yeah, I'm going to try to hit 2 quick points real quick. And by the way, my second point is about the trenches. If I come back and I can't remember where I was going to go with it. You talked about does Tennessee need Nico Iamaleava, and that is a resounding yes. Of course they do. Nico is the quarterback of this team. He's the best quarterback on this team. But besides the obvious reasons of why Tennessee needs their starting quarterback back, I think that Tennessee is going to need to be balanced on offense to win this game. There's elements of the running game that is going to be the engine of this team, and that has to get going for Tennessee's offense to work. But then I look at a game like Mississippi State where, no, the Bulldogs weren't able to beat the Bulldogs. That was a little weird. Mississippi State was not able to beat Georgia, but they were able to throw the ball around the field. I believe they went for more than 300 passing yards. So I look at Tennessee as being able to be balanced and have success. Ryan, you mentioned this, and I don't know if you were exactly talking about offense or defense, but in your Georgia preview, you talked about them being a balanced team. I think that Tennessee needs to be balanced themselves against what Georgia can do. And again, that starts with having number 8 behind center. And then you get to the game about the trenches. This is the SEC football, right? We know that the trenches are going to be where this game is made and where it's built and where the foundation of this game is going to be. But it's not necessarily the same Georgia that's in the trenches as it has been in years past. Is that a place where Tennessee can take advantage of with having an extremely stout front 7? We'll see about the injury report. Tyree West did miss last week, as I'm trying to fight off a sneeze right now. Tyree West did miss last week. He's been one of Tennessee's absolute best players on the defensive line. I believe he was the 3rd highest ranked Pro Football Focus player on the Vols defense through 7 weeks of the season. But he missed last week's game. He's their starting defensive end as of the last 3 games before that. So certainly interested into what his status may or may not be when the injury report comes out on Wednesday. But yeah, I think you got to win the trenches, and especially on the defensive side, that's an area where Tennessee has an opportunity to do so.
Yeah. Ryan, you have anything to add along those lines?
No, I mean, I think that's the big part of this game. And I'm sure we'll get into more of it later, but certainly the line of scrimmage, both these teams have been turnover prone. Georgia worse than Tennessee as of late, but Tennessee, we know, has had pass protection issues on the road, offensive just functionality issues on the road. So I think all that matters. The other one I would point out, the big position group for Tennessee is just the receiver group. Tennessee's better Tennessee receiver groups have gotten manhandled in this game in the past against a very, very physical Georgia defensive backfield. No matter who's playing quarterback, that group's going to have to step up, and they don't have to be dominant. Like Tennessee defensive line maybe needs to, if not dominant, really, really control. You don't need Tennessee's receivers don't need to just win that battle upright, but they need to hold their own and need to make some plays in this game.
Well, as we do ahead of every game, let's give some keys to the game. We've kind of touched on a couple of here already, but Ryan, I'll kick it back to you first. I mentioned my key was Tennessee's defensive line and affecting Carson Beck. What is your key to a Tennessee victory here Saturday night in Athens?
Yeah, I mean, this is one that's a little bit harder. so many of these games we've talked about, like the keys or what they need to do to win or what happens if they lose. And you do it in the tones of thinking Tennessee's going to win. This one's a little different with them being 10-point underdogs in this game. I think, maybe the big key amongst many, but the big key for me, I would circle say hold Georgia under 100 rushing yards. It's a tall task. Tennessee's run defense has not been very good the past couple of weeks, but that was a strength of the team early in the season. Georgia has not had its normal really strong rushing offense this season. They're 15th in the SEC. And, I do think the running backs have been solid with ETN, and Frazier's had a little bit of fumbling problems, but I think he's overall been solid. But the run blocking has not been great. So control things. I think, again, the defensive line's a big part of that because I worry a little bit about the linebackers in open space with those two backs. But take away the run game for Georgia, force them to make throws on third down, on third and long, when you can bring pressure, when you can pin your ears back with James Pierce and put Carson back into some of those spots where you feel like you can pressure him and maybe force him to make some mistakes. If I'm Tennessee, I want to put this game on Carson back to win. And if they can hold Georgia to under 100 yards rushing, the defense would have done that successfully.
Yes, I agree, Ryan. I would make Carson Beck beat me because Carson Beck hasn't shown the ability to do that consistently and has been very bad in the last month. So, Tennessee's rush defense as well last week didn't look great. Mississippi State was able to, have success, unlike many teams have had this year. And I thought that was maybe a little bit of a cause for concern from Tennessee's win over the Bulldogs. But if Tennessee can shut down this run game, which is possible, it's not like Georgia's just world beaters in the run game or anything like that. They got good talent, but haven't been that consistent at it. So if Tennessee can do that, make Carson Beck beat you, I like Tennessee's matchup there against a struggling Carson Beck with a receiving core that isn't really going to scare anyone. I know Dominic Levette's good, but outside of that, there's not much, to be scared of there, Rick.
Yeah, I got two quick ones. And the first one is right there in the same neighborhood as what you guys are. Maybe this might even track into a little bit more of the bolder territory, but Tennessee's got to win the turnover battle. You're going on the road. You're playing against a quarterback who has been very turnover prone as of late. He does not read the secondary entirely well from what it looks like. I'm not a quarterback myself, but that's kind of what's been indicated to me from watching those games. And then Ryan just mentioned one of the running backs has a bit of a fumbling problem, but especially those interceptions. No matter who's playing quarterback for Tennessee, obviously one way is going to be a lot more outweighed than the other. But I think that Tennessee just has to win this turnover battle. Cannot give Georgia opportunities to capitalize on Tennessee mistakes. And I think that Tennessee's got to be able to. I mean, you got to make the most out of your own opportunities. You got to get into the ball into the other side of the field. You got to have scoring drives. And losing that turnover battle is not going to be good, giving the Georgia crowd more to work with. And that's kind of my other key to the game. This is a hostile environment, right?
Yep.
I just talked about it a couple weeks ago, but Tennessee looked horrible when they went to Georgia and Athens 2 years ago for one of those hostile games. You look at the Georgia football schedule. I don't believe I have it pulled up in front of me right now, but this is the home game for them. They went on the road to play, Clemson was the neutral site. They went on the road to Texas. They went on the road to Ole Miss. I think they went on the road to Bama, right?
Yep.
This is far and away the home game for Georgia. Their fans realize that. The team realizes that. I think now, right, we've heard about Georgia or Kirby Smart after Georgia wins the national championship. He comes out and he says that he told his team that everybody picked him at 5-7. Nobody in their right mind picked him at 5-7, but he was able to use that as motivation to get a national championship. Now he can actually look at them and not have to lie to their faces and say, look, you're not in the playoffs. The committee doesn't believe in you. They don't think you're good anymore. They think you've lost a step. Look at all these things. This is going to be a motivated Georgia team. Now, is there still a ceiling for this Georgia team? I think so. Do I think that motivation alone can get you significantly past that ceiling? No, I don't. But I think it can get you ready for that game, and especially can get your fans ready for that game. Tennessee's got to communicate well. Tennessee has to, be an 11-man, I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but 11 men playing as one, right? That has to be the goal for Tennessee. It's got to be a cohesive unit between those 11 guys. between the 22 starters out there on the field. So, yeah, I really do think that the environment is going to be a big one. You've got the game day atmosphere leading up into the game. There's a lot to it. Tennessee's going to have to win the red zone as well. We'll talk about that later. But those are kind of the two I wanted to hit is got to win the turnover battle. If you want any chance of winning, to me, and then B, figure out how to beat the crowd, because that was not something that they were able to do 2 years ago. And that's something they struggled with against Arkansas a bit too.
Yeah.
To your point, Rick, just the fourth home game this season for Georgia. One of those being Tennessee
wild.
Tech. Other two being Mississippi State and Auburn. So not a good home schedule this year. This is the game.
And they know that. You guys know, one of the closest people to me is a diehard Georgia fan. They were well aware since the day the schedule came out that there was one home game on the schedule, and it was their rivals to the north. So they've been this game has been circled for a long time.
Yeah, and if you don't think that Georgia's defense can still pull out a vintage 2021-esque performance and dominate Tennessee's offense, which is like not obviously a juggernaut, then think again, because it still can happen. I mean, none of us will be surprised if Georgia, only had to put together 2 drives in the first half and is up 14-0 at halftime. Like, Tennessee's offense is still not shown enough to where it's just like, okay, they're going to have a good day no matter what. No, Tennessee's offense could be downright awful. And I think that possibility is on the table, because this Georgia defense can still turn it up. That home crowd can still affect this Tennessee unit big time. So Tennessee has to be sharp, and Tennessee has to, I think Nico has to play, and Tennessee has to be able to execute at a high level. I know it's cliche, but you can't let the elements affect you, and give Georgia any extra opportunities, because you have to think that Georgia is going to be playing with a lot of fire.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, they've done it on the road to a better offense this season than Tennessee, so that's definitely in play.
All right, let's do some quick fill in the blanks. Ryan, Tennessee loses to Georgia, kind of the opposite of what we've been talking about. It blank.
Well, I had 2 different things for this, and both of them Rick just talked about them. I'll say Tennessee's pass protection breaks down in ways we've seen it do on the road. The way it did at Arkansas, the way it did at Oklahoma, the way it did at Florida last season. To that combined with a bunch of false start penalties. Tennessee's offense is not built to play from behind the sticks this season. It is especially not going to be built to play behind the sticks against this Georgia offense, or just Georgia defense. So Tennessee needs to be able to build off of the pass protection. It's been a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better the last month of the season, and not take a big step back in their first test on the road against probably the best defensive line they've seen all season.
Rick, I'll pitch it to you. Tennessee loses to Georgia if blank.
Oh, man, I just had one off the top of my head, and I've lost it. It was a really good one, too, because I stole the other 2 from Ryan. Okay, yeah, you go ahead. I'm going to try to think of it. Last time you talked, I did think of my thought.
My lose and blowout are kind of the same. It's, do these numbers change or do they stay the same? And I mentioned this on the Chase Thomas podcast Monday, but these numbers are staggering for Carson Beck. Under pressure. In the last 3 games, 43 yards, 5 picks, 7 sacks under pressure. And as I said earlier, 0 QBR in the last month under pressure. He has been the worst quarterback in the SEC when pressured. Pressure Carson Beck, which I think Tennessee can do. And if these numbers continue and you stop the run, then I think Tennessee could blow out Georgia. It's unlikely, but I think it's on the table. And Tennessee loses to Georgia, I think, if offensive struggles, obviously, as we've talked about, the elements getting to them, everybody knows that. But these numbers somehow improving, or just Tennessee not being able to pressure Carson Beck. If you can't pressure Carson Beck, if the pass rush struggles, I think you can have a good game. And that's how Tennessee loses. Because Carson Beck has a good game, I think Tennessee loses pretty much no matter what. Like, Carson Beck has to, not play well, I think, for Tennessee to win this game.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought of mine. And Jack, that was great. And that actually, thank you for that, because that got me where I needed to go. This isn't a 100% end all be all, but I think it's I think it's going to be Tennessee loses if the game goes the way I think it is. Tennessee loses if they've got to attempt a lot of field goals.
Okay.
That feels like a situation where if Tennessee's attempting a lot of field goals, it means it means two things to me. Number one, you're putting yourself in a bit of a risky situation. Max Gilbert looked great last week against Mississippi State. Hit the best field goal of his career at 51 yards. Last 2 weeks before that, he was a little shaky. What is this going to look like on the road for him in such a hostile environment when there's so much pressure on his shoulders? This isn't necessarily Oklahoma or Arkansas where, yes, those are games on the road. Those are both big environments, but it's not a ton of pressure of, hey, kind of a pseudo playoff game going on right now. Also, though, if Tennessee's not getting into the red zone, that to me is a huge problem. If Tennessee is able to get down the field but not turn those into points, that is a huge problem. So that's why I say, like, theoretically, I guess Tennessee could win like 15-14, but I don't see that happening. So to me, if Tennessee is attempting a lot of field goals, I don't believe that is a good sign for Tennessee, and I do believe that they would lose on that mark. So I think everything else, kind of, we've hit a lot of these points. Tennessee loses if they lose the turnover battle. Tennessee gets blown out if Nico's not playing. Just those kind of things that we've talked about already. But to me, and I'm going to be watching this offense, and Tennessee struggled a lot to consistently get the ball down the field, especially in the first half of play. Not necessarily last week, but certainly in conference play this season. So if Tennessee is attempting a lot of field goals, it means that they're struggling in the red zone or struggling in Georgia territory, and it puts Max Gilbert, who I do believe is a good field goal kicker, but it puts him in a risky situation based on some of these performances in the last couple of weeks.
And what would not give me optimism for Tennessee based off of that, Rick, is that Tennessee's passing offense in the red zone has basically been non-existent. Georgia's allowed 5 rushing touchdowns in the red zone all season. So it's not quite, I think that's the 2021 Georgia defense that, at least at this point of the year, hadn't allowed a rushing touchdown. It's not that, but it is still a Georgia defense that's going to be tough to run on between or inside the 20-yard line when the field shrinks. And again, as much as improved as Nico has been the last few weeks, still the passing game has not been very good when the field is shrank. I don't know probably sound like an idiot. I'm not sure what the correct verbiage is. Shrunk. When the field's
shrunk. Isn't that the movie?
Yeah. I think that's right.
Wow, that's an old movie.
The pass he made the Brazzell against Alabama is like the one big touchdown Tennessee's had passing the ball in the red zone all season.
Yeah. No, you're right. The red zone passing offense needs to be better. And Max Gilbert has to attempt a lot of field goals, probably lose, and if he misses, definitely lose. So if you're going to potentially lean on Max Gilbert, he's got to do what he did last week, of course. All right, last one.
Which I do think that is going to be a bold prediction of mine. Last week I put a bold prediction in our game predictions, and Ryan roasted
wasn't bold at all
after the game.
Oh God,
he said it wasn't bold. I felt like it was bold. I said that Tennessee would continue their streak of holding opponents under 20 points. Mississippi State's got a pretty good offense. I think they could have gotten to 20. That would have been crazy. That would have been bold.
Come on. That wasn't bold.
My bold prediction. No, that was
it would have been more
bold.
They did score 20.
No, it wasn't.
It was bold with a lowercase b. It wasn't bold with a capital B, but it might have still been bold.
No, it was bold with a lowercase b, and the rest of the word wasn't finished. It was just B, lowercase b. No OLD, just
Jack.
One letter. Not
Jack,
bold.
Don't flame me like that.
At all.
I got nothing against that. My bold prediction for this week is that Max Gilbert will do something that's big in this game. Whether that's a 45-yard field goal plus, whether that's a miss, something going on.
Or Nico doesn't play. Gaston Moore gets hurt. Jake Merklinger gets hurt. Max Gilbert, QB1, carries Tennessee to the win.
That would be bold with an uppercase B.
That's
an uppercase O. That's an uppercase L. Key emphasis on that. And that's an uppercase D. That's bold. That's bold font as well.
In the WordPress, that's headline 2. That's headline 2, bold. Massive text.
I
think Jackson Ross would come.
What a nerdy.
Maybe Josh Turbinville as well.
Yeah, Jackson Ross said that 10th string
quarterback.
Yeah, I like. There's literally no. There's
Josh
no
Heupel
world.
is going to say, "Give me a jersey" before Max Killer starts throwing passes. He's like,
Dylan Sampson
he's going to
will.
pull a Burt Reynolds and longest yard.
Wildcat, yeah.
Dylan Sampson's 100% playing Wildcat quarterback and running the ball
Yeah.
every single play before Max Gilbert
Yeah.
gets in.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh man, that's too funny. All right. Last thing, let's go quick on these. I kind of said mine, but just
Disrespect to Navy Schuler.
the path to a Tennessee blowout win is what, Ryan? Is there one?
I mean, it's Carson Beck not only throws interceptions, but he throws pick sixes, or
Yes.
he
That's
turns
it.
the ball over inside the 10-yard line, and Tennessee's actually able to score on it, take advantage. I mean, I think Georgia has to.
Well, hold
Tennessee's
on.
defense / special teams has to score points.
Would you consider Ole Miss's win over Georgia a blowout last week? What's your blowout? What qualifies a blowout?
Home fans leave in the fourth quarter.
Well, okay,
My
yeah, but like
blowout.
score wise.
I think it's got to be at least 14 and 14 where Georgia never has the ball. Not even Georgia never has the ball. It's never a 7-point game in the fourth quarter.
Okay, so what Ole Miss did last week, right? It wasn't.
That was like
it
10
never
points, wasn't it?
I don't think it was 7 points in the fourth quarter.
Okay. Yeah.
I think
No, I
it's 23-10
get.
or 22-10, right? And they made
Yeah,
28
I think so.
because they kicked 2 late field goals.
I think
Yeah.
so. I think that's right. Yeah.
Because of the turnovers. Yeah, so I think Tennessee could do to Georgia what Ole Miss did. It's much more difficult because it's on the road and Ole Miss has better offense, but it's possible. Like Tennessee has a better defense still.
Yeah, I'm feeling worse about my blowout designation because I didn't feel like that game was a blowout while I was following it in the fourth quarter.
I think most people would say 3 scores could qualify.
Yeah. Three scores, and I don't know, maybe, yeah. The way I explained it, you're right. That Ole Miss game would have been.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think it needs to be pick sixes, but turnovers for sure. Multiple from Beck. No rushing threat whatsoever from Georgia, and I think early lead because you got to get Georgia behind quick, and I think that could set up for Tennessee to roll because Georgia has shown. I mean, outside of literally one game, which everyone remembers, Bama, they haven't played well from behind this year. So, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
Guys, I'm not really sure how my mic is sounding because it just got unplugged.
You
But then I plugged it back
sound
in.
beautiful, Rick.
Thank you. I know I do look beautiful. I agree with you guys. I think Jack, you talked about the Ole Miss game last week, and Carson Beck threw 3 picks in that game.
Yeah.
I believe something like
Too
that.
late.
So yeah, I think it is. Boy, oh boy, I think it's forcing Carson Beck into just a miserable game where he's got no more will to even continue the contest. And I think that's what you got to do to the fan base as well, because for as long as those fans are going to be there, I think they're going to be able to power their team or give them a little bit extra juice throughout those 4 quarters. So if there's something you can do to just drain the life out of them to where it's 10:30 at night and Dylan Sampson's just one run after another, and Tennessee's got a 10 to 14 point lead and they're driving down the field somehow. I think if you can get the crowd out, that certainly helps. But a blowout to me can only happen if Carson Beck is just truly miserable in this game, which we'll see.
Yep. All right. Before we get out of here, don't obviously have to give score prediction, but kind of what are you thinking for this game, Ryan, as far as who wins and kind of the range by how much?
It's just difficult to say with the whole Nico X factor.
Let's say Nico plays. I think
Nico
the
plays
is a little higher than the pessimism.
Yeah, I would agree with that. If Nico plays, I think Georgia wins and Tennessee covers. So Georgia wins by 4-7 would be, or we'll say 3-7. So somewhere in that range would be my guess.
Rick?
I see this being a bit of a first to 20 points wins game. I think there's a situation where both could be under 20. I wouldn't hate that. No matter Tennessee's quarterback situation, I think that's in play. But if Tennessee can be a pester for Carson Beck, I think that's definitely in play. So my initial thinking is somewhere along an 18-14, a 17-14, something like that. But that would also lead into that would work for Ryan's prediction as well. If this is a Georgia win, which that is the way I'm leaning, then yeah, that's Tennessee losing by 3 or 4. That's covering, but Georgia wins.
Yep.
So I'm in that less than first to 20 could win this game.
And I'm with you, Rick, on the general score, and it feels like I felt this way a lot of weeks this year, where I'm just like, I don't understand the over/under in these Tennessee games. But a couple trends against the spread. Georgia's just 2-7 against the spread this season, 1-6 as favorites, and then Tennessee, the over is only hit in, I believe, one of Tennessee's SEC games this season. I believe that's the case. In Georgia, the over is only hit in 3 of their 9 games this season. So feels like Vegas continually overvalues points in Tennessee games and Georgia games, and it seems like Vegas is continually overvaluing Georgia this season, which I think those two trends would point to exactly what you're saying, a low-scoring game that's pretty tight, no matter who wins.
I wonder what game it would have hit at the over.
The Tennessee game?
Last week was going to be my guess.
Has to be. Wouldn't have been. It's not Bama. It's not Arkansas.
It would
it's
have
not
been
Oklahoma.
33-14. So, oh no,
47.
I don't want to do math on the podcast again.
47. It's not Oklahoma, Bama, or Arkansas. I don't think it would have been. It's not Kentucky. I don't think it would have been Florida, right? 23.
It was not last week. Maybe it's none of them. I think it was. It might have been Kentucky.
28-18 hit the over.
Yeah, it was 45.5. So
wow,
barely.
by half a point. That's crazy.
Wow, that
all
is
right. Well, there you go.
Good math.
Kentucky
team.
Who thought that game hit an over? Jesus.
Yeah, but again, that's one where I was like, that just leads to it perfectly. I was like, in that game, I was like, I don't see how Kentucky's going to score 10 points, and Kentucky really well exceeded my expectations and scored 18, and the over/under still hit by half a point.
Yeah, exactly.
A Kentucky offensive performance that I hardly saw as possible to happen for the over to hit by half a point.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm kind of the same way as these guys with 4 to 7 point win. I'd take Georgia by around a touchdown right now, I guess. Obviously, that changes if it's Gaston Moore at quarterback. But for all of Tennessee quarterback news, Georgia preview, everything you need to know ahead of the big game this weekend. Be sure and follow along at RockyTopInsider.com for all of your coverage needs. Also, basketball as well, as men's hoops are back in TBAA-FCC tonight against Montana to play their third game of the season.
A lot of respect for Montana and their basketball program, the history that they bring to the table. A lot of respect.
There you go. All right. Well, good Tennessee obviously coming off a big win against the Louisville, about 22 points on the road. So they're riding high coming into tonight. You can also follow Ryan at rshump00 on X. That's SCHUMP. You can follow Rick at Rick Butler and also me at Jack Foster Media. And of course, follow at Rock Top Insider. If you're watching on YouTube, be sure and comment, leave a like, and subscribe if you want to the channel. And if you're listening wherever you find your podcast, we appreciate you listening to the RTI Press Pass. But for Ryan and Rick, I'm Jack. We'll see you next time.